Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Tim Travels. Again, I'm Terry, your host. Tim's on an extended vacation, and he's asked me to fill in for him. And so today, as promised, I'm going to talk about what I did before I came to my present company. Give you a little background on the carriers that I've worked for, as well as some of my insights into those carriers and what to look for. The first thing I did after I quit practicing law was I went to work for myself, and I had still have a Sprinter, a passenger van that I took the seats out of, and I started hauling stuff. I basically found work on U-Ship and some other load boards for smaller loads. But I quickly got a stable of regular customers, and I started hauling a lot of high value stuff, antiques, vintage neon signs that had been restored, but also props for movies. And so it became really interesting. I've hauled stuff as antiques that were from the mid 1700s. I hauled props for the latest Seth Rogen movie, I think it's called American Pickle. That was shot on a lot of it was shot on a sound stage in Pittsburgh. I got to go on the sound stage. It was pretty cool. And I've delivered addresses in the middle of Beverly Hills. I've delivered in in Manhattan, all over the country, literally all 48 states in the continental United States when I was doing that. The downside to that was, I slept in my van, I was on the road a lot, but it's kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Everything is you and you alone. There's no support staff, there's no mechanics available, there's no anything I needed. I had to figure it out myself. And the other thing is, while the money is good sometimes, I got paid huge money for like expediting certain things. It's also not predictable. And so at some point my wife said, well, hey, why don't you get your CDL, since you like being on the road and going places and hauling stuff for people. So at first I didn't think I wanted to be an over-the-road truck driver. So I found a job that promised to get you your CDL, and you could drive more local, more regional. And that was with Estes Express. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Estes Express is a less than truckload company, and they're the ones, one of the companies you see hauling pups all over the place. So I got a job as a driver trainee / dock worker at their Harrisburg, PA terminal. And initially it was represented to me that I would work on the dock until the next class for CDL training came up, which meant I was going to have to work on the loading dock for about, maybe 6 weeks. Now, if you've never worked on an LTL loading dock, especially in a big terminal like the Harrisburg Estes terminal is, it sucks. Okay, the work is, while it's not technically outside because you're under a roof, however cold it is outside, it's going to be a little bit colder under that roof because of the concrete floors. If however hot it is outside, it's going to be a little bit hotter underneath that roof. The pace is really fast, and it's kind of mayhem. They pay well for a job that you basically need zero experience except maybe handling a forklift. But that's about the only advantage that I saw, and the fact that I was working towards getting a CDL school that was going to be paid for. The terminal in Harrisburg was an absolute shithole. It's filthy from top to bottom. It's not even properly illuminated. What I found there is that there's a lot of good people working there, but management, from the frontline supervisors directly above the dock worker to the terminal manager, none of them really give a crap about any of the employees. Everybody's worried about covering their own butts. They kind of manage by threats. And even when you're working your hardest, and even when you're being given conflicting orders by these different supervisors, it's still never enough. The other thing that really bothered me was that it was a 5-day-a-week job. However, I can't recall a week that I was working on that loading dock where I wasn't forced, along with everybody else, to work a 6th day or a 6th punch. So it was routine to work hours you wouldn't originally been scheduled. The other thing that happened is you would find out literally at the last minute. So, you could say to somebody, hey, I'll do this on Saturday, and on Friday at 11 p.m. find out that you had to work 2nd shift on Saturday. So that was a real problem. The other thing that's really kind of insidious is that for some reason there's this antiquated transportation law that basically allows companies like Estes to not pay overtime. So remember I said we always did a 6th punch? They don't have to pay overtime by law until you've exceeded 52 hours in a week. So you could work 6 days and probably not exceed that unless you were working 10 hours a day, which is not uncommon either. So that was bad enough, but I was like, well, I'm going to get trained. And the drivers at Estes seemed to be pretty happy. And the line haul supervisor was a pretty cool guy. So I was like, I'll just suck it up, right? I'll just do what I'm told, work on the dock, and, keep out of harm's way and everybody else's way, and finish up and get my CDL. Well, the night before, so I already had, let me back up. I already had instructions on going to the school, which was going to be up at the Williamsport, Pennsylvania terminal. And arrangements had already been made, when I was supposed to travel. It's a Saturday night. I'm supposed to go to the school the following evening, like stay in a hotel on Sunday. At about 10:30 at night, I get called to what they call the hub shack, which is the supervisor's area. I go up there. The terminal manager's in there, the operations manager, who's basically my shift manager, and the assistant terminal manager are all in there. And the operations manager says, hey, I just want to let you know you weren't approved for going to school on Monday. And he then goes on to explain that the paperwork wasn't submitted. Now, the terminal manager's sitting right there. It's his staff that's responsible for doing that. He didn't say one stinking word to me. He didn't say sorry. He didn't say, hey, somebody dropped the ball. Nothing. He didn't say jack. The assistant terminal manager, who was pretty much of a stand-up guy, says, man, this is kind of messed up. What can we do for him? And then he came up with the idea. He said, well, if you're willing, so I was working 2nd shift. He said, if you're willing to go to 3rd shift, you can jockey until the next school comes up, which is actually 3 months later. It's not like a regular trucking company that has their own school where there's a lot of classes starting every week. So I'm like, okay, I'll do the jockeying thing. So I start jockeying on third shift. But the more I learned about the place, all the old timers would constantly remind me that no one there ever kept their word. And these are guys that have been with the company for 18, 20, 24 years. Some of them just got fed up and quit. And so I became more and more concerned that I wasn't going to get to that CDL school even 3 months later. The other thing that was going through my mind is that I was jockeying, which was good practice for backing and parking, a little bit of practice with unhooking and hooking trailers, although jockeying is a little bit different because the way the jockey wagons work. And I did get practice braking sets of pups and moving stuff around a yard. So it was good. It was good practice. It was good to, pre-trip a truck kind of stuff. But I was concerned about a couple of things. One is that they weren't going to keep their word again. But also, I was really concerned with the safety issues I saw at the terminal. It seemed like the only equipment that the company maintained were the tractors, which is to keep the drivers happy. But I saw trailers that were just trashed, trailers that would get damaged, and they would still want to put cargo in them and send them out on the road. One time I was loading a trailer, actually it was a van, and it had a big hole in the floor right over the tandems. And I said something to a supervisor, and his response was, "Oh, we'll just drive around it." Like they were more than happy to load a trailer that was not roadworthy and send it out. And if the driver didn't catch it or reject it, so be it. You could be driving down the road and have a trailer that collapses. On 2 occasions, I saw drivers who failed to secure the dollies that connect the front pup and the back pup, and the dollies got away and rolled downhill, and on both occasions didn't hurt anybody but crashed into trailers that were actually parked at the loading docks. Those things can be moved by hand, but if you got run into by one, it could easily kill you. So I just saw we had a forklift that just went off a dock. Fortunately, no one was on it, but I don't think the brakes worked or it was working properly. All sorts of stuff that made me think, man, as a driver, I'm not sure I want to be hauling this crap equipment down the road and risking my life and, my career. So after jockeying for a while, and also one of the things they like to do is they decided that when I was low man on the totem pole, I would have to jockey for 8 hours and then come in and work on the loading dock for another hour and a half to 2 hours at the end of my shift. That was not uncommon. But then they even went to a policy where every jockey, even the guys that had seniority and bid on jockey positions because of the schedule, were going to have to come in and work the dock. And, that was causing big problems for some of these guys that worked overnights because they had to get home to relieve their wives who then had jobs during the day, and they stayed home with the kids because they worked third shift. So it was just that type of a company. Like, they just, in my opinion, did not care about any employees. They just didn't care. They also didn't even care that much about the cargo they were handling. I mean, I saw stuff, expensive pieces of equipment from all different sorts of industries and businesses get totally jacked up. Stuff would say, do not double stack. The supervisor I had one supervisor, I had just loaded some stuff in a trailer, and he was basically like, well, get this other stuff in there too. And I'm like, well, it's palletized. Where am I supposed? He's like, put it on top of that stuff you already put in there. I'm like, well, it says do not double stack. He's like, I don't give a fuck, just put it in there. Take it off the pallets and stick it in there. That was the attitude on a daily basis. They did not care. And I just didn't want to be associated with that. I'm not saying anything against the people that work there. I've met drivers since I've been driving who are just, kind of marking time, finishing up their time at that company, at Estes Express, and, waiting to retire. I've talked to other people that are P&D drivers, like out on the West Coast, and they're happy. It could have just been that terminal, but I can only go by what I saw, and I was unimpressed, to say the least. It was just bad leadership and, bad management, in my opinion. So that was the first company I worked for that was kind of in the trucking industry. So then I was like, well, I'm going to get my CDL and I'm going to quit messing around. So I went to work at night transportation, mega carrier. They have around 4,000 trucks, terminals all over the country. I was assigned to the Carlisle, Pennsylvania terminal, which is mostly dry van. They have some dedicated flatbed out of there, but I was a dry van guy. I got my CDL at the CDL school that Knight has in Phoenix, Arizona. From the moment that I went to work for Knight, my experience was everybody was very professional. The folks at the school were great. I got my CDL on the first try. They did a lot to take care of the students. The instructors were just good people. They had a stash of food for the students because they knew a lot of people were coming in there without much money, and they would be like, hey, we don't want people going hungry. Knight did a lot to make sure that people got taken care of. Everybody there in Phoenix was professional. I met the CEO, CFO. We went to the corporate headquarters, which is not at the same place as the school is. The school's at the terminal, but headquarters is up the road a little bit. But everybody at Knight was very professional, sound people. And I thought the training we got was good. So I left there and I went back to my home terminal, and I was assigned a trainer who was actually based out of the Charlotte terminal. He was a guy that had some experience with a couple of other trucking companies. One was a kind of a more regional carrier that he drove for, and the other was a mega carrier. He was really good. He was a younger guy, but we got along great. We worked a lot as a team. He trusted me a lot with the truck, and I learned a lot from him. He was just good. He didn't say a lot, but when he said something, it was important, and I learned a lot, working with him. I got off his truck about 28 days later, and I went solo. I ended up staying, after I went solo, I ended up staying at Knight probably about 6 more months. The reason I left was mostly money. I had a great DM. And I know not everybody's had the same experience at Knight, but my DM was awesome. Just awesome. My terminal manager was brand new in the job. He was awesome. I can't say any more about those guys. They were both good. But because of the way Knight is, it takes a long time to really make any decent money at the company. Their facilities are really nice. Their facilities are located all over the country. It's easy to get into a terminal. They're in a lot of big metro areas. And I think they take pretty good care of the drivers. Now, I will say that I'm a guy that likes to run. And, you know, my DM, and let me back up to the training truck for a minute. You know, the guy that trained me said, well, when do you want home time? And I said, it's your truck. I'll do home time whenever you say. You know, it's your truck. You're doing me a favor by training me, because some people have to wait to get a trainer. So I took that same attitude when my DM first talked to me. He's like, well, hey, you know, what states don't you want to run in? And I said, I looked at him, I said, Knight's a 48 state carrier, so I guess I'm going to run in all 48 states. And he's like, all right. And he liked that attitude. Now, I think that attitude goes back to being in the military. You know, people don't ask you what you want to do. People tell you what needs to be done, and you're expected to do it. I worked for a 48 state carrier. I didn't run in all 48 states, but I ran coast to coast, and that was fine because I got a lot of miles and I did qualify all the time for bonuses, but my base was just low. I started out at 36 cents a mile for the first 30,000 miles, then I went to 40 cents a mile. So I wasn't making the money that I really needed to make at night. So, and again, if the situation were right and Night offered me something, I would definitely consider going back there, because again, I liked the people I worked for and with. They treated me well. The next company I went to work for was J&R Schugel. Schugel is a company that's based out of New Ulm, Minnesota. I was almost going to say Montana. New Ulm, Minnesota. I went to work there because I was offered more money and I was offered a $15,000 bonus. What I learned at Schugel, and you may, if you get around the country, you're going to see Schugel trucks. They all say, almost all of them say J&R on the top, and almost all of their trucks are T680 Kenworths. They have a few international LTs, but most of them are Kenworths. And they come in a variety of colors. You know, they used to refer to themselves as the Skittles company. My experience with Schugel was mostly negative. That started in orientation. I mean, they'll send you on a bus. I drove myself and got reimbursed to Columbus, Ohio. And they have terminals in Columbus, New Ulm. They have a terminal in Georgia outside of Atlanta. And by the way, I mentioned Estes, the Harrisburg terminal is a shithole. Well, the Georgia terminal is, for Schugel, is a shithole, as are, basically they all are. And I was coming from Knight, which has really nice terminals. And Schugel, the only money they spend is on those trucks. And the trucks are kind of stripped down. Like they said to my class at orientation, well, if you want an inverter, you have to buy it from us and we'll have it installed, but then it's yours to keep and we'll just deduct it from your pay. And, you know, in my mind, I was like, what the fuck do I want to buy an inverter from you for? Because the industry standard now, because it was at Night, is trucks have inverters. They might not all have fridges, but they got inverters. So I was like, what am I going to do with an inverter if I go somewhere else where they already have them? You know, I don't need it. So I didn't have an inverter put in, and I just carried a cooler with me, and I just kind of let that stew. And so, you know, I mentioned I was getting a $15,000 bonus, and it was going to be paid out at $500 a month. So I was like, well, the pay's not as much as I want, but it's more than I was making at Night. And with the $500 a month bump, you know, that's $6,000 a year. You know, I'm starting to get closer to where I want to be. Well, what I didn't know going in is that I would have to hit 10,000 dispatched miles in a calendar month. I would have to be dispatched on 10,000 miles in a calendar month to qualify for the $500 bonus. If I didn't hit that, but I was 9,000 to 999.99. I only got $250. So the first month, I didn't hit it. The second month, which was February of 2020, I was out every single day of the month. Now you're saying, well, that's February, that's a short month. But remember, in 2020, February was 29 days, and I still didn't get 10,000 miles dispatched. It's not 10,000 driven, it's dispatched. So I didn't get my full bonus through no fault of my own. I was available, the truck was running, but I went a lot of places and just sat, especially on weekends. And my DM was overwhelmed. He apparently had tons of drivers. They don't have enough DMs. And, you know, they would never pick up the phone. The DM would never pick up the phone. You had to send them a message. I can't tell you how many times I dropped a load, sent an empty call, and I would get this message back, no pre-plan. And that always irked me because I was like, yeah, no shit, there's no pre-plan. I know that. I'm telling you I'm empty. Why don't I have a load? Because again, I like to run. And not only that, but even though I would stay out for weeks at a time, they still couldn't manage to get me home when I wanted to be home, like for Father's Day. So, and one incident, well, there was plenty of instances, and one of them was I dropped a load in Billings, Montana, and it was kind of, so Billings is in the Mountain Time Zone, my DM was in the Eastern Time Zone. I don't get a load before he goes home, which was kind of messed up, but whatever. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, well, I'm kind of out of hours. I'll just go to this truck stop and I'll wait and, you know, circle back in the morning. So at around 7 in the morning, Mountain Time, I know he's been in the office for an hour. I start calling him. Not only do I not get a hold of him, because I also sent a message on Qualcomm, I don't get a hold of him. I don't get any response to my messages, and I don't even get his voicemail. It goes like straight to the company's line. But nobody, and I mean nobody, picked up the phone at that company. Nobody. Like I would just routinely dial extensions trying to get a human being on the phone. And this was common. This was very common. And you could ask any Schugel driver, I guarantee they have the same experience if they're being truthful. I wouldn't get anybody. So finally I tracked somebody down at like the headquarters. And I'm like, hey, where's my DM? I've called him, and the guy was like, oh, well, and by the way, this was on a Thursday. I think I dropped on a Wednesday. It was on a Thursday. He's like, oh, he's on vacation. He's on vacation. This guy left me sitting at a freaking truck stop outside of Billings, Montana with no load, and I had no DM. He just went on vacation. So then the guy was like, oh, well, you know, and I went off. And he said, I'll have somebody call you. So this other guy calls me. And my DM's name was Eric. The other guy that called me, his name is Eric too. So he gets me a load, but it doesn't pick up till the following day. So I sit for 32 hours. I can't get a 34 because I gotta leave, because I have to deadhead from Billings to, I think, Burley, Idaho. And I picked up a load of basically packaged hay that was going to like Fleet Farm. It was like bedding for pets, for like rabbits or whatever. So I get that load and, you know, I head back. Well, that wasn't the first time that my DM just left me sitting for hours and hours and hours because he didn't follow up. He didn't know what the hell was going on. And then he would lie to me about it. Another time I sat for 29 hours. And by the way, I would have to fight with him to get any detention pay. And then when he'd say he would pay it, it would never show up. Like the 29-hour job was outside of Chicago. And it took a month for me to get paid on that. So the funny thing is, I finally started applying other places, and they must have gotten a request for information because they all of a sudden gave me a new DM, and this woman called me and said, you know, she'd follow up after the 4th of July. She never followed up. None of them ever followed. I called the manager of the dry van division. He didn't return my call. They don't care about their drivers. They just don't. You know? I mean, they could have gotten a lot more out of me, but they wouldn't. I became convinced that Schugel purposely makes sure people don't hit their bonus numbers. And they have other tricks they use to basically screw drivers out of money. And I'm going to do a separate show just on that because they're probably not the only company doing it. But I'm very convinced that I kind of cracked the code on how they do mileage, how they do bonuses, and even what they're doing with their employee stock ownership plan. But it's all pretty sketchy. So I left Schugel, and so here's the big reveal. I went to work for GP Transco in August, and many of you probably have heard of GP Transco. They have a pretty good reputation, and it's deserved. Everybody that I deal with at this company, everybody is a professional. I had a little bit of an issue with my first DM, and I made one phone call and it was fixed. I mean, I did get another DM, but yeah, I run like a scalded dog, and I make good money, significantly more than I did at either of my previous companies. Now, again, I know why I didn't make money at night. I also know why I didn't make money at Schugel, but it wasn't because I wasn't running hard enough. I don't have to ask for detention pay. I don't have to ask for breakdown pay if I break down. Like the other day, I had to have a bunch of trailer tires replaced in Arkansas. My DM just pays it. He doesn't even ask me. One day they asked me, hey, can you check a lot for several trailers? They just paid me for doing that. They respect me. They respect my time. I'm kind of excited because today, even though I'm a little bit tired, I ran 711.9 miles. Now, I didn't do that because I wanted to, per se. I did it because I didn't get loaded in a timely manner, but I really wanted to get this delivery done here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota today. I can't say enough good things about GP Transco. I know there are other people on YouTube that are Transco drivers that have explained stuff, but there's not. I mean, I don't kill it every week, but a lot of weeks I run in excess of 3,000 miles. And with the way the bonuses work, and it's a weekly bonus, the way my base pay works, my base mileage rate, a lot of times I have gross checks that are in excess of $2,000 for the week. So it really is, it's a good company to work for. There are a couple of things that I will point out that you know, because I'm all about, being upfront about everything. I think on their website and maybe in some of their recruiting materials, it says there's a 5% match on the 401k. That is not the case. It's a 4% match, where I think maybe the 5% comes in, and this might be just like a typo or somebody misunderstanding it that was preparing the materials, is if you contribute 5%, you then max out that match of 4%. And so basically they match the first 3%, then it's a 0.5% or 50 basis points for each additional 100 basis points or 1% that you put in. So if you put in 5, you get 4 matched. And the plan is pretty reasonable as far as 401k plans go. They have all the other benefits that you might need, you might think of. They take care of the drivers. When I got to orientation, they gave us a really nice backpack. They gave us all winter coats that are of course they got the company's logo on them, but they're nice. They're warm. They got hoods, and the terminal is top rate. The one thing that I will say that there are a lot of things that stand out about GP Transco, but one of the things that stands out to me, and this is after having been at Knight and Schugel, is the shop. When my DM calls and says, hey, I have a 9 o'clock appointment for you to get your, A service, B service, oil change, whatever you want to call it. I show up there, 15 minutes before and the appointment time, and 10 minutes or 5 minutes before, my truck's pulling in the shop and it's done. It's done quickly. I've had problems where I pulled into the terminal. Like one time I pulled into the terminal and I went inside and I'm like, hey, I got this tire on my trailer, and the trailer was loaded, that looks like the tread's about to come off. And so they said, what trailer is it? And they said, we'll send a guy out there. So he came out. He's like, yeah, you're right. And he said, do you want to pull it in? I said, I'd rather just keep my truck here. So he went and got one of the spare trucks and pulled it in himself. They moved the stuff around themselves. They're super helpful. They're on top of stuff. I've had a couple of warranty issues with my truck. And when they said, oh, come at this time, the guy from Freightliner was there. And I was given a 2021 Freightliner, had about 15,000 miles on it. And I like it. It has a fridge, it has an inverter. Behind me, you can see my microwave that I put in. But like I said, I can't say enough about GP Transco. The night dispatch, they pick up the phone right away. They act like they know what's going on, because they actually do. And this, again, not to beat on Schugel, but I actually had a night dispatcher hang up on me one time when I was having a problem at a customer's. I was trying to get a question answered. He just hung up on me. And I talked to other drivers and they're like, oh yeah, that must be so-and-so, he does that. I can't imagine that would ever fly at GP Transco. So like I said, I can't say enough about the company. I'm very pleased that I made that choice. And if you got a question about any of the companies I discussed, so Estes Express, Knight Transportation, dry van division, Schugel, J&R Schugel, dry van, or GP Transco, hit me up in the comments and just ask, and I'll answer as truthfully as I possibly can. And I, I'll be happy to share other information if I haven't covered it. So anyway, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. We got a lot more good content coming, so stick around, and please like and subscribe, and like I said, comment if you have any questions. I'm happy to discuss anything. If you have a comment, you know, and it's contrary to what I'm saying, you have an issue with something I'm saying, you know, please don't just blurt it out or kind of drop a hand grenade and then walk away. If I'm saying something you think is wrong, I'm more than happy to hear about it, but you gotta back it up. You gotta, you know, say, oh, you're wrong about this and here's why. And I'll be happy to admit when I'm wrong, because I did it plenty in court, you know, where judges were like, oh, you're wrong. I'm like, all right, we'll go on. But I appreciate all y'all. Be safe out there. And again, this is Terry with Tim Travels. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.